Nah, we had no clue. As a professional, it's your job to be ready when you get in, and that's what I had to do tonight.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me, as always, on Twitter at redrock_Beeble. We've got lots of stuff to talk about from Thursday's 5 games. We're going to preview a 9-game Friday in the NBA, so
let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. I'm having storm issues here. Someone told me it sounds like I live in a jungle with the amount of storms that we get, but no, it's just weird Melbourne weather that everyone who's ever lived in Melbourne in Australia will understand that it can be 36 degrees, which is what it was like a day or two ago, and that's 100 Fahrenheit. And today it's cooled right down and pissing with rain and storms, and I fear that power will go out, so hopefully we don't have that problem today. Let's get stuck into it with the monstrous line of the night, and it goes to Eric Bledsoe of the Milwaukee Bucks. 26, 3, and 6 for Bledsoe, 2 triples, 5 steals, 8 of 15 from the field, and 8 of 8 from the free throw line. He has been really, really impressive over the last month, a top 25 player. He was a guy that put up multiple top 25. In fact, his last 3 seasons have all been top 25 seasons. We had to deal with that bullshit from him at the end of from the Suns at the end of last season, and then again at the start of this season as they sat him down while they waited to trade him. But in that last month, 20.5 points, 2 triples, 4 rebounds, 4.5 assists. So his assist numbers are down. He'd averaged over 6 for the past 3 seasons. But 2.1 steals is where a lot of his extra value is coming from. And he's taken his field goal percentage up in that last month to 49%. Helps when you're playing with better players. Hopefully you get easier looks. Although that didn't necessarily happen for Draymond Green last season. But in general, playing with better players, less off a defensive focus on you, you can hit a better field goal percentage. He was at 43% last season. 49 this season, got a true shooting of up over 60%. So obviously putting in some big numbers, the scoring, well up as well. And he's a significantly underrated player. He's also been relatively healthy the last 2 seasons. Well, healthy last season, healthy this season. No injuries so far. We always do worry about the meniscuses or the menisci in his knees. But at this stage, we're 2 years in and everything looks to be okay. And let's hope it can stick that way for Eric Bledsoe and the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's go to the waiver wire line of the night, and it is Mick Beasley of the New York Knicks. 23 and 12 for Bees, 4 assists, 2 steals and a block, 9 of 13 from the field and 5 of 5 from the line. Now, he had a big game not that long ago, the end of last week. And the reason for that big game was because Porzingis was limited and played only 21 minutes, and Beasley got super hot and scored 32 and about 25 and a quarter at the end of one of their games. This was a little bit different. It wasn't a case of Porzingis being limited as he returned from an injury. It was a case of Doug McDermott being terrible, Lance Thomas being terrible, and Enes Kanter and Koch both playing under 20 minutes. So more Porzingis at center lineups, more Beasley at the 4, and more Beasley at the 3, which we've seen now for 2 consecutive games. Now, I put very little trust in Jeff Hornacek doing anything on a consistent basis, but if Beasley is going to play over McDermott, over Thomas, and over Kyle O'Quinn, which is things that he could definitely do, then he is going to have value. I wouldn't say that he is a must-add guy in 12-team leagues, but if you want to take that flyer and hope that we see Porzingis and Kanter manning the center, the all 48 minutes at center there, or McDermott or Lance Thomas being reduced in their role at small forward, enabling Beasley to get to 25 minutes a night, then there is going to be a level of value there for him. Over the last 2 weeks, in 25 minutes a night, he's the 46th ranked player. He's 120th over the last month in just 22 minutes. Now, there are games in there, and a fair chunk of games, that Porzingis was out that he started. In fact, over the last month, he started 4 games. He's played some extra minutes in few of those. But it is a situation here. 33 minutes today for Beasley, and that's with Porzingis being healthy. So that is something that is definitely worth us paying attention to. And if you're looking for some scoring punch, maybe he's a guy just to add and see what happens in that next Knicks game. Do they run with different lineups? Do they realize that Lance Thomas is not really that good and Doug McDermott is also not very good, and we can get Beasley out there? I don't think it's going to be consistent. That's why I'm not bumping his projections through the roof or anything like that over on Basketball Monster, but it is something for us to pay a level of attention to and see exactly how it does go down over these next 2 to 3 games and see if he can maintain at least a higher level of playing time than what we've seen recently, and that would be a huge, definitely very interesting fantasy situation for him. The young gun of the night goes to Dario Saric of the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers coughed up a huge lead in this one, 25, 9, and 4 with 5 triples and 2 steals. And most of his value coming from the fact here that he was 10 of 12 from the field. So that really, really boosted him up. He is a top 100 player so far this season, getting extra minutes, more minutes than I thought he would. The injury to Markelle Fultz has definitely helped that, and we'll see how that all pans out when Fultz is back in the next couple of weeks. But over the last month, Saric is a top 50 player, averaging 34 minutes a night, 17, 8, and 4, a steal a game, 48, 84, and 36 as his percentages. Got his efficiency way up from where he was last season because, much like Bledsoe, he is now not the primary focus on offense as he was for big chunks of last season. Things are completely different in that regard in Philadelphia, and he is putting up some really good numbers. I do envisage a level of drop-off. If you can trade him for some other top 50 player, I would be absolutely all over that. I don't think you'll be able to do it, but I do feel some level of decline going to come from Saric. But for now, he's putting up some really, really good numbers quite clearly. The dart of the night. Maybe a bit unfair to Taj Gibson, but on these lower volume days, generally guys with decent performances might get tagged with the dart of the night. And as I say, or as people often will comment to me, why wasn't this person dart of the night? Why wasn't this person? Generally, when I look at it, I want to look at people who are owned in over 70% of fantasy leagues to be the dud of the night and not guys who got injured. So Taj gets that classification today. Not a bad night from Gibson, 12 and 7, 5 of 7 from the field, but it's the 2 of 5 from the free throw line that did let him down. But it does give me an opportunity to talk about Gibson, who has been impressive this season. The 78th ranked player so far this year in 34 minutes, in large part because he's shooting a crazy, crazy high percentage. He is at 57%, got his true shooting up to 61%, and last season he was 52. The year before that, 52. The year before that, 50. So a massive, massive spike in efficiency. He's also seen his free throws go from 72% to 78%, and now he's also taking threes. Not that he's taking many of them, but it is adding a little bit of extra value to what he does, averaging 12 and 8, still less than a steal a game, still less than a block a game, and his number one category is his field goal percentage. So that is something to pay some attention to, and if that does regress to other levels that we've seen from him in the past, then a lot of that value from him is going to tumble. But at this point, he's put up, across 36 games, 34 minutes, really, really good numbers, and in fact, over the last 2 weeks, he's shooting 69% from the field. Giggity! When Nemanja Bjelica is back at his full minutes load, it might impact Gibson by 1 or 2 minutes, but I wouldn't be expecting a huge, huge drop-off. He's playing 36 minutes a game over the last month, and I think that comes back to around 33, 34, so that's going to drop some of that value away from him. But if the efficiency can keep up, then he's a guy that you keep on holding. But much like Saric, some injury guys coming back just might cut into his value just a little bit, which is where I think we're going to be at with Taj. Now it's time for me to answer your questions as I'm starting to introduce as a new segment on the show. It is question time. So today's question comes from Beaumont Livingston, who's on Twitter at Don _ Kigne. Kigne, Kigne, I hope that's right. Sorry, Don, Beaumont, whatever your name is. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. This is a question for the pod. Where do you see rookies like Jason Tatum, Don Mitchell, Benny Simmons, Lauri Markkanen, and Jordy Bell in a couple of years? What are their fantasy ceilings and their real life ceilings? So, all these guys are putting up obviously fantastic numbers. Someone separately asked me about Don Mitchell today and what sort of player comp is he. And to me and Matt threw out Bradley Beal, and my player comp, which I think I first heard from Nate Duncan, was Gilbert Arenas. Now, Arenas had 3 top 10 fantasy seasons. I'm not saying that Mitchell can get there, because in 2 of those seasons, Arenas averaged 29 or 30 points per game, and that might be tough. But he's already a guy who's you can almost lock in as a 20-point per game scorer. Arenas was getting that value because he was getting steals, he was getting 5 assists per game, which is something that I think Mitchell can do as well. So I think that he has got absolutely phenomenal potential, and that's something we did talk about with him in the preseason. The high steal rate is always going to be a good thing for fantasy, and he's taken on a much larger offensive role and playing more point guard than I anticipated. So I think that if we're going to go best case scenario, absolute ceiling, I think he can be a top 15 player, Don Mitchell. He's probably realistically going to be a top 50 guy in drafts next year, and maybe even a top 40 guy, and I think he's going to settle in for numerous top 30 seasons. As for Simmons, he's a top 10 guy as well. Ceiling-wise, real life, yeah, he's a perennial all-star type. I think Mitchell might struggle to be an all-star, but I think Simmons can be a perennial all-star. As for Jason Tatum, I don't think that he is going to have as high a ceiling as what Mitchell and Simmons do, especially for fantasy. I'm just not sure that, again, the shooting, we've seen him regress now. He's 0 of 6 from 3 in the last 2 games, and that's been really keeping him above water. Not above water, but it is really keeping him in this conversation as this elite player shooting 50% from 3. That's starting to come back down. He was a guy that never really impressed overly in terms of his other stats at college. That's been a little bit different here, but he's still got some work to do there. So I'm not sure he's ever a top 10 guy or even a top 20 player, but I think he can have top 40, top 50 fantasy upside. Maybe top 40 is a fairer estimate for him. Lauri Markkanen, not as high on him real life. You've heard me talk about it before. The lack of blocks, the lack of steals, the potential poor field goal percentage. You can look at Porzingis and say that he's had good numbers as a poor field goal percentage guy over the first couple of years in his career, but he blocks like 2.3 shots per game. Markkanen's just never going to get to that level. He's rebounded decently well this year, but that can be a struggle of his as well. I'm not super high on Lowry for fantasy. I don't think that he will ever become a top 40 guy. I don't even know if he'll ever become a top 60 player in fantasy. Whereas Jordy Bell, he gets 30 minutes a night, then it's a comfortable top 50 to me. I don't think that he can approach the Mitchell Simmons top 10, top 15 type of upside, but Jordy Bell can be a top 50 guy as well. I think that he is the Warriors' full-time starter at center next season. That doesn't mean 30 a night, but it probably means 25 or 26 a night, given the way that Kerr has played him as a starter, and even 22 off the bench in the last game. And that's going to make him a fairly comfortable top 70 guy, at least next season, probably even higher. So that's how I see all those guys. They've obviously been studs. This draft class has been amazing. We still haven't seen Markelle Fultz, who I believe is still very, very awesome. We haven't seen the best out of Dennis Smith. Lonzo Ball's chugging along and getting much better. There are so many good players in this draft class, and they're just a bunch there that Beaumont/Don has asked me to go through. So I hope that answers your question, mate. All right, let's get into these games now and discuss them in that little bit of extra detail as we do in this box score breakdown portion of the show. The first game was the Detroit Pistons and the Orlando Magic. Andre Drummond remained great, 17, 18, and 5, 3 blocks, 3 of 4 from the line. He has been fantastic, but I think everyone wants to know, how did Ish Smith go in his first start? 18, 7, and 5 with a steal and a block. You literally couldn't ask for anything more than that. He did shoot 50% from the field and didn't go to the line. So they're two things that can drag his value down. He's not normally a good shooter, so 50% is an outlier, and he's a fairly poor free throw shooter, so not going to the line actually helped him here. So there is a level of concern that he won't be at this level, and he won't shoot this well, and he won't score as much. He also took the most shots on the team, which is something I don't think will continue, especially when Avery Bradley's back. So, yeah, he is a guy to own for sure, and I'll talk about Tyus Jones a little bit later on. He is a must-own guy, Ish Smith, for this 6 to 8 week period that Reggie Jackson's out, but this could be the upper level of what we can expect from him. Reggie Bullock also strong, 13, 3, and 3 with 3 triples, but he continues to shoot at absolutely, completely unsustainable rates. 71% from the field, 60% from 3. And when those numbers drop off, and when he's not banging them in at that level, then I think his playing time comes down. So while he's fine to add as a streamer, get some threes in, these numbers, and literally his number one category in fantasy at the moment is field goal percentage. And that's, you look at his rank and you go, Josh, I'm going to bring it up now. And Josh, he is, over the last 2 weeks, the 60th ranked player. Why shouldn't he be a must-own guy? It's because in that time he's shooting 60% from the field, and it is his number one category by double the highest of anything else. In fact, his next 2 best categories are threes and steals, and you add the Z-score value from those together, and his field goal percentage is still above that. That's how dominant that field goal percentage is, and it is not going to stick. This is a guy who was, over the first 4 years of his career, 36, 34, 44, and 42% from the field, and now over these last 2 weeks, he's at 60. It cannot possibly stick. He won't continue to shoot at 60%, and that's going to knock a level of his value. He doesn't rebound. He doesn't get assists. The steals are nice, and the threes are nice. That'll stick, but it's going to push him down to maybe being a top 150 player, maybe, but not a top 60 guy where he currently is. Luke Kennard started, had 8 points in 20 minutes. A lot of fouls, a lot of early fouls as well. He's struggling a little bit at the moment, while Langston Galloway played only as the backup point guard, no backup shooting guard minutes, and he was terrible, 1 of 9 from the field. I still think that he is a guy to grab in your deeper leagues, but he's not going to have 12 or 14 team league value. Onto the Magic, they welcomed Aaron Gordon back. He played 30 minutes and had 14 and 7 with 2 threes, so that's awesome to get him back. Of course, he didn't miss his threes, while Lord Alfred Payton is on a roll. 19, 8, and 8. Some early tough going from Payton, but I said to you, I wouldn't have dropped him, and if he was dropped, I would add him straight away, and this is exactly one. It's good to see him have this big game with Fournier there, with Gordo there. Of course, Nick Vucevic isn't going to be there, but he's not going to be there until February, so Payton is still going to be able to put up these numbers, and he went 6 of 6 from the line after a proportion for the season where he was like 30-40% from the line. That is huge from him. So, of course, he is a must-own. Fournier, 17, 3, and 5. Or Bismack Biyombo, a nice offensive game. 12 points on 7 shots with 13 boards and a block. He is a guy that is probably a must-own, more of a should-own, but can be considered must-own, especially if you're looking for those rebound and block numbers. John Simmons, this is the worry with him. 7 points on 13 shots, 23% shooting. Still 4 assists, still 4 steals, still should be owned. But when everyone comes back, and that's going to be February, so when you get to fantasy playoffs, I think Simmons is going to lose a ton of value. With Gordo back, Mario Hezonja went back to the bench, 4 and 3 in 18 minutes. Had a ridiculous 3-on-1, 4-on-1 fast break where he had the ball and then tried to drop a pass between his legs and ended up in a turnover and then was banished to the bench for a long time. He was the 6th man in this game, and he will continue to get some minutes, but he's not going to have anywhere near the value he was having when as Gordon was out. The Minnesota Timberwolves and the Milwaukee Bucks, this game just started an evening of weirdness in the NBA. The Wolves had a 20-point lead early in the third quarter, and somehow the Bucks came back and absolutely smashed them. Tyus Jones got the start because Jeff Teague was out. 35 minutes for Jonesy, only 6 points, but 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 steals. This guy averaged 4 steals per game in the 3 starts he had when Teague was out, and I thought that's going to be hard for him to maintain. I was right because he actually had more than that. It won't continue, but he is a legitimate guy that can average 2 steals per game, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, and maybe 10 or 11 points. Obviously, the scoring not here. Now, the news came out about Jeff Teague today, and I talked about it yesterday, saying I thought maybe ACL, at worst MCL 8 weeks. It turns out to be an MCL sprain, but it's as good as possibly could have been expected. A grade 1 MCL tear. Now, Woj is reporting that some in the Timberwolves are thinking 2 to 4 weeks. 2 weeks is just ridiculously optimistic, and given the way that Thibodeau runs his plays, maybe the Timberwolves don't actually have people with any sort of medical training in their medical staff. That's probably unfair to those guys, but there's no way, I cannot see him back in 2 weeks. So Jones is still a must-own guy to me. Now, some people were going back, you guys, you screwed me yesterday by saying Jones is a must-own. Look at this, Teague's only out 2 to 4 weeks. You screwed me. No, look, you know what? Maybe if Teague's not out for the season, that's fine. But it's the sort of move that you have to make. You have to go and make, because if you wait until the next day to go and make these moves, then you miss out. And I still believe, I added him in leagues, so if it's a mistake, I made the mistake as well. But you've got to make these moves. In most cases, you can't wait around to go and grab him. Now, the people who said, do I drop Jeff Teague? Like, no, you don't drop Jeff Teague because we don't know what the situation is. But in that case, you're always good to have this roster spot that's available so you can just grab people and see how it all works out. Now, I think Jones is a better player than Ish Smith. Ish had the better game today, but Jones was still very effective with 5 assists and 5 steals. So it's still a pretty impressive performance from Jones. In fact, Jones was the 12th ranked player on the day, and Smith was the 24th ranked player on the day. So he still had the better game today. And if Teague misses 4 weeks and 5 weeks, which I think it could push to, and Jackson's back in 6 weeks, and you get that 1 extra week out of Ish, and I would still prefer Jones in the majority of cases, just because I think he's going to be so much better than Smith in that time frame. And then when he's gone, I'll use that spot for someone else. So you might think, you told me he's a must-add, and now look at this. I couldn't have predicted that it was going to be literally the best possible case scenario. I gave what was information available at the time. And even, again, there's always the risk that, he wasn't going to be out for the season. But you have to make those moves. You have to make that decision. You have to grab the guy. And you have to see, because if it works out, then it's a huge game changer for you. And that's my thought process on doing it. You might have a different thought process of attacking things in fantasy and getting your waiver wire ads. But coming back and saying, I knew it was the wrong move. Look, cool. Then you just don't know that. Like that, they're the sort of risks that you do have to take. And that's something that I would still do again, is taking Jones, making him a must-own guy. Jim Butler, 25-7 with 2 steals, handled the point guard responsibilities because Aaron Brooks was bad. He's bad. He only played 4 minutes, so Butler is going to have some increased usage and increased ball handling, which is only going to be good for his value. Wigo had 24-3 and of course did nothing else and hurt you from the free throw line, while Townsy had 22-5-4. On to the Timberwolves. No, the Bucks. Once again, just consistent weirdness from Jason Kidd. Malcolm Brogdon did not enter the game until there was 3 minutes left in the second half. So he played the final 3 minutes of the first half. And then he ended up playing 26 minutes in total. So he played 22 or 23 minutes of the second half out of a total of 24. Came in 2 minute mark of the third quarter when Giannis was pulled out for making a mistake. And then Brogdon played the remainder of the second half. So you look at that box score and you go, 26 minutes for Brogo, 13-5-3. That's about standard. But it was just as far from standard as you could possibly believe. And then now Kidd has to have been taking the piss. He has to have been, because someone asked him, why didn't you go to Brogdon at all in that first half until there was 3 minutes left? And he's like, we've got lots of guys that need to play. Sterling Brown came in, and he came in, and I picked him to go in because he was the first guy I saw. Now, it has to be taking the piss. If he's not taking the piss, that he should be fired immediately, because that is just... And if it was anyone else, I would think, if Steve Kerr said that, I would go, you know what, this is clearly a joke. But with some of the other strategic decisions that Kidd makes, I'm not so sure that it is. And it is just as confusing and baffling. And the Bucks win, I feel, in spite of him. It doesn't make any sense. And it may be because the Timberwolves continually choke away fourth quarter leads because everyone is absolutely rooted from playing 55 minutes a game. There's a battle of weird coaching situations going on in this one that enabled them to come back. But just weirdness all round. We had Tone Snell and John Henson, the Muppet, taken out with 3 minutes gone in the first quarter because they made mistakes, and all the players said the right things. We're happy with those decisions for Kidd to take us out at that point because we weren't executing things. But it's just a whole bunch of weirdness that this guy goes through all the time. Yanni, 22-10 in 40 minutes. The Muppet had 14-4, while Middleton 14-7. So some pretty decent numbers for a lot of those guys. And again, weirdly, we had Jason Terry and Sterling Brown re-enter the rotation, and DeAndre Liggins, Kidd's favorite, who would come in at times when he shouldn't have, he was out of the rotation. So again, him saying that it's just the first guy I saw, it sounds stupid, but nothing else makes sense. So that's the reasoning we have to go with at this point. Just stupidity, really. The next game, the Rockets and the Celtics, another just gigantic comeback. The Rockets were up by 26 in this one, and the Celtics just flew home over the top of them on a back-to-back. A massive win by Boston. 2 late offensive foul calls against Jim Harden. No one wants to see those sort of things called. Obviously, Marcus Smart is an absolute master at getting the refs sucked into that sort of stuff. I'm not going to comment on whether I think they were right or wrong, whatever. It's not something you want to see decide games on that sort of on those sort of calls, but that's the way it is. The Celtics get the victory. Harden, without Chris Paul, had 34, 6, and 10 and 5 triples. And Trevor Ariza, who Mike D'Antoni says, we want to cut his minutes down, he played 39 and had 11 and 6 with 3 triples because Gerald Green, who was signed in the morning, he played 11 minutes and he had 1 rebound, and he is not going to be an add in anything outside of 30-team leagues, but he's in the rotation at least until Chris Paul returns and maybe until Luke Marmute comes back. Beyonce Weber got his steal in 15 minutes. He's a deep league steals streamer, while without Clint Capella, Ryan Anderson played 40 minutes, had 9 and 8, and Nene had 10 and 4 in 19 minutes. I don't care if Anderson plays 40 minutes. He's not a 12-team ad. Nene, if he's getting under 20, he is not a 12-team ad either, even with Capella sidelined. On to the Celtics, no Jaylen Brown, but Marcus Morris returned. He was bad, 10 and 4 in 19 minutes. Don't touch him in 12s, and he's a borderline 14-team league guy. The Celtics were that far behind that Brad Stevens just screwed up everything that he was doing in terms of game plan and said, well, let's just change it up. And Abdul Nadir started the second half. He played 21 minutes and had 5 of 7. Don't even expect him to be in the rotation most nights. So that was just an emergency type of thing. While Marcus Smart, this is why I do like him for fantasy, 13, 6, and 5, 2 steals, 3 blocks, and the shots were sort of going in. I still think in a punt field goal percentage league or punt build, you do have to own him, even though it has been tough at times this year. I said about Tatum earlier, he did miss all 3 of his triples for the second consecutive game, but had 19 and 5 with 2 steals and a block. While Rozier, 20 minutes, 13-5, 2 steals, a block, own him as long as Jaylen Brown is out. Kyrie had 26, while Al Horford had the game winner, but only at 9, 8, and 4 on the day in total. The New York Knicks and the San Antonio Spurs, good win for the Spurs. Porzingis, 34 minutes, 18 and 7 with 6 blocks. That's a huge night for him. And one of the more positive things to come out of this from the Knicks was Frankie Ntilikina played 32 minutes, 9, 3, and 11 for Frank with 3 steals. Those 11 assists, those 3 steals make him an ownable guy. The problem is I have 0% faith that Jeff Hornacek will continue to play him big minutes, but he has played 27 or more in the last 2 games, and that's what he should be doing. But the other thing is Jarrett Jack played 31 also, so they were playing together. It wasn't like a Ntilikina 32 Jack 16-minute split. They played together, so that is a level of risk there in terms of Ntilikina. But if you missed out on Ish, if you missed out on Tyus, Ntilikina is worthy to own because those assists and steals, if he plays 30 a night, that's going to be useful. Courtney Lee had 18 in his 39 minutes, where I mentioned McDirt, Lance Thomas, Enes Kanter, and Koch. All of those guys played under 18 minutes. Kanter just 17 for 12 and 6, and that's 2 piss-poor games in a row from him after that monster Christmas Day performance. Onto the Spurs, Kawhi was probable, and then he was out due to injury management, so some weird stuff going on with the Spurs. That meant Kyle Anderson started. He had 16 and 8, hit all 4 of his shots, but of course, with Kawhi back, don't look at his past performances to think that Anderson's a must-own 12-team league guy. He's not, because his minutes aren't going to be that high. As we move forward, Rudy Gay hurt his heel, 6 and 7 for Gay. He is owned in 68% of leagues, and I have no idea why. Aldridge, 25, 5 and 4 with 2 blocks. I still think you can sell high and get a top 30 guy back for him, and I would be attempting to do that as much as I could. Tone Parker had 14, while Powell, another strong game, 17, 11, and 7 on 64% shooting. His efficiency's through the roof. His assists are way up. I think this is going to drop off, but of course he's a must-own guy for now. Also a pretty good game from Dan Green, 15 points, all of those coming on 3-pointers. The last game of the night, just another crazy comeback with the Sixers having a huge lead against the Blazers and then giving that up late as the Blazers came home over the top of them. TJ McConnell, 10, 3, and 6 with 4 steals in 34 minutes. Another nice performance from TJ. That's 2 in a row from him as he continues to get Jared Bayless's minutes. But like Šarić, when Fultz returns, he is going to lose some of that playing time. Embiid was questionable. 29 and 9, 6 triples, 3 assists, and a block. That's a fairly good performance, and his value was really only hampered by the fact that he went 5 of 8 from the free throw line, while Benny Simmons had 17, 4, and 8. Another strong performance from him, and importantly, he was 3 of 3 from the free throw line. Bob Cove suffered a left middle finger injury. We don't know what the extent of that injury is at this point. He had 4, 2, and 5 in his 24 minutes. Hopefully he is healthy. But if he has to miss time, what happened last time is they moved Šarić to the 3. They started Richaun Holmes at the 4, and Holmes, who was not in the rotation here at all, could be a sneaky guy to go and add in a 14-team league if we assume that Covington's going to miss. I don't know that he will, but there is a possibility that Covington misses time and Holmes could be the beneficiary. It could also be Trevor Booker, who's clearly being preferenced to him at the moment, or preferred is probably the right use of English. So that'll be interesting to see how they do that, or whether they pull Holmes from being a DMP city and inserting him and playing him 25 minutes. Onto the Blazers, Dame Lillard, who was off the injury report yesterday. He was ready to go. He ended up not playing. So Shabazz Napier started, had 23, 3 and 3, 3 steals, 2 triples. As long as Lillard's out, Napier's going to have value, and he looked really, really good down the stretch here, while McCollum had 34, 7 and 4. And Yusuf Nurkic got into early foul trouble, battled through them, had 21 and 12 with a steal and a block, but just a real hurt he put on your percentages. 39% from the field and 69% from the line.
Giggity!
On 16 attempts, so huge volume was a concern. Mo Harkless looks like he's back in the rotation now. 8, 2 and 2, a steal, a block, 2 triples, more of a 16-team league guy, but back in that rotation, playing more minutes than Evan Turner and guys like Pat Connaughton. Al-Farouq Aminu, 0 points, 10 rebounds, one of the weirdest stat lines of the season. I don't believe that he is 100% a must-own guy, definitely not in 10-team leagues, and in 12-team leagues, I guess it depends who's around. I have a differing opinion on him to many others. I think he's fine at times, but he's too streaky, and a lot of his early value is coming from unsustainably hot three-point shooting, which we've seen drop off in recent times. I am going to take a quick break now, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the action for a packed Friday in the NBA, 9 games for DFS, and we'll do that after a song by, who is this one going to be behind, from the band Con Etiquette, and the song is called Human and the Divine. Nah, we had no clue. As a professional, it's your job to be ready when you get in, and that's what I had to do tonight.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me, as always, on Twitter at redrock_Beeble. We've got lots of stuff to talk about from Thursday's 5 games. We're going to preview a 9-game Friday in the NBA, so
let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. I'm having storm issues here. Someone told me it sounds like I live in a jungle with the amount of storms that we get, but no, it's just weird Melbourne weather that everyone who's ever lived in Melbourne in Australia will understand, that it can be 36 degrees, which is what it was like a day or two ago, and that's 100 Fahrenheit. And today it's cooled right down and pissing with rain and storms, and I fear that power will go out. So hopefully we don't have that problem today. Let's get stuck into it with the monstrous line of the night, and it goes to Eric Bledsoe of the Milwaukee Bucks. 26, 3, and 6 for Bledsoe. 2 triples, 5 steals, 8 of 15 from the field, and 8 of 8 from the free throw line. He has been really, really impressive over the last month. A top 25 player. He was a guy that put up multiple top 25. In fact, his last 3 seasons have all been top 25 seasons. We had to deal with that bullshit from him at the end of from the Suns at the end of last season, and then again at the start of this season as they sat him down while they waited to trade him. But in that last month, 20.5 points, 2 triples, 4 rebounds, 4.5 assists. So his assist numbers are down. He'd averaged over 6 for the past 3 seasons. But 2.1 steals is where a lot of his extra value is coming from. And he's taken his field goal percentage up in that last month to 49%. Helps when you're playing with better players. Hopefully you get easier looks. Although that didn't necessarily happen for Draymond Green last season. But in general, playing with better players, less off a defensive focus on you, you can hit a better field goal percentage. He was at 43% last season, 49 this season. Got a true shooting of up over 60%. So obviously putting in some big numbers, the scoring, well up as well. And he's a significantly underrated player. He's also been relatively healthy the last 2 seasons. Well, healthy last season, healthy this season. No injuries so far. We always do worry about the meniscuses or the menisci in his knees. But at this stage, we're 2 years in and everything looks to be okay. And let's hope it can stick that way for Eric Bledsoe and the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's go to the waiver wire line of the night, and it is Mick Beasley of the New York Knicks. 23 and 12 for Bees, 4 assists, 2 steals and a block, 9 of 13 from the field and 5 of 5 from the line. Now, he had a big game not that long ago, the end of last week, and the reason for that big game was because Porzingis was limited and played only 21 minutes, and Beasley got super hot and scored 32 and about 25 in a quarter at the end of one of their games. This was a little bit different. It wasn't a case of Porzingis being limited as he returned from an injury. It was a case of Doug McDermott being terrible, Lance Thomas being terrible, and Enes Kanter and Koch both playing under 20 minutes. So more Porzingis at center lineups, more Beasley at the 4, and more Beasley at the 3, which we've seen now for 2 consecutive games. Now, I put very little trust in Jeff Hornacek doing anything on a consistent basis. If Beasley and the numbers are starting to come. Now, he's probably never going to be able to live up to the per 100 possession numbers he put up in college or that ridiculous efficiency, but his ability to be an efficient shooter from the field, from the 3, from the line, to block shots, to rebound at a high rate as well, and be a decent scorer makes him a very, very interesting fantasy player. I think that he's playing power forward at the moment, as well as backup center. He's playing alongside Ed Davis, alongside Yusuf Nurkic, and then alongside guys like Al-Farouq Aminu and Mo Harkless in those smaller lineups. The minutes are well up for him. He's not a guy that I think is going to have much of a sniff in standard leagues for this season, but I do think that he does have... He's one of those guys that I think might be able to put together 2 or 3 top 100 fantasy seasons as a reasonable estimation, but could also be a guy that can put up 5 or 6 top 50 guys as seasons as maybe a ceiling for him, just because of that combination that fantasy loves: high free throws, high field goals, hit threes, block shots, grab rebounds, all that stuff. and he's a guy contributing in multiple areas. Plus, his passing has been a little bit surprising this season. Over the last 3 games, we're talking about almost 4 assists per 36 minutes. So getting those assist numbers up in the last 3 games, 2 assists, 3 assists, 2 assists. And if you're going to add that to his game, that definitely gives him that ability to become a guy who could potentially sniff top 50 value on a consistent basis. So he's a guy to watch. I do like him for dynasties. I've said that plenty of times with him, and it's good to see that he was behind Caleb Swanigan in Summer League and in preseason, but he's comfortably outpaced him. He's pushed ahead of Myers Leonard, and he's in that first big off the bench sort of situation behind Nurkic and Aminu, along with Ed Davis. They come in at different times, but they're the backup front court, and I imagine he sticks in that role and continues to improve, get his block rate up and his efficiency, which was really poor to start the season, but he is absolutely flying with it at the moment. So he's a guy to watch, and he's a guy whose numbers look fantastic, and let's hope he can translate that into on-court production. Perfect DFS lineups from Thursday on FanDuel. Ish Smith, 38.9, while Eric Bledsoe had 49.6. That's your point guards. At shooting guard, Marcus Smart, 40.7, and CJ McCollum, 48.4. Jim Butler, 38.5, and Kyle Anderson, 27.6, while Mick Beasley had 51.4, and Dario Saric, 44.8, with Andre Drummond at 55.1, and that cost $58,800 for a total of 395 points. On DraftKings, it was McCollum at 50.25, Napier at 35.75, Beasley 51, Powell at 43.25, Drummond 55, Bledsoe 47.75, Saric at 47.25, and Ish Smith at 37.75 for a total of 368, and that cost $49,700 dues. Let's get in and really knuckle down into this DFS stuff for Friday's action. The first game, the Rockets on a back-to-back taking on the Wizards. We don't know on the status of Chris Paul. I'm going to label him as questionable at this point. If he is out, obviously Eric Gordon gets a bump. We have Deontay Weber coming in, but probably not a DFS target. And Jim Harden becoming more reliable there as well. For the point guards in this one, Johnny Walls at 8,600. I've just really struggled in his last couple of games, only 26 points in that last outing, but he has done pretty well against Houston in the past. I just don't really feel it here for John. As for Chris Paul, 9,300, uncertainty. Yes, it's the first game of the night, so we'll know if he's ready to go, but we won't know. If he plays, it'll be, I guess, limited minutes, so he is a fade in my mind. At shooting guard, Jimmy Harden, 11,800. Should be looking at another 60-ish type performance. I like him for cash. I like him for tournaments, while Braddles Beals at 8,100. That's probably just a little bit too high on FanDuel. He had 47 in the last game. I would consider him a tournament sort of a guy, but I'm not sure how high his upside actually is. But at 8,100, getting 50 is not a bad return. I just feel like for cash, it's not quite a good play. While Gordo at 5,800. Love that if Paul's out. Probably a fade to me if Chris plays. Otto Porter at 6,700. The numbers since John Wall has come back have been impressive. 32 points over the last 3. And I think for cash, he's fine. I'm not sure how high his actual upside is here, but I feel pretty good about him at least registering me 30 points. And again, FanDuel's pricing's pretty tight on Friday, so getting 4.8x should be enough to cash in a lot of different contests or cash games. Anyway, Trev Ariz is at 5,500. The numbers have been a little bit down for him, averaging 23 over the last 3 despite the high minutes, but 5,500 is okay, and if he was in a cash lineup, it's not bad, but I think his upside is fairly limited, while Kelly Oubre and PJ Tucker are not guys that I'm interested in. At power forward, Mark Heath's at 4,900, and he's playing more minutes. I just don't think that he's really a guy that I'm super excited about, same as Ryan Anderson. Mike Scott is always a guy that you should consider for your tournament pools. He can go off and drop a 40 burger, which would be awesome at 4,000, but of course the likelihood of that happening is fairly low. At center, Marcin Gortat, 4,400. Really good record against Houston. Averages 36 points the last 3 times. But without Clint Capella out there, and if they go to Ryan Anderson, he might be limited. But it is worth throwing him into a tournament pool at that salary to hope that he can at least return 30 points. I think the chances of it are pretty low, but he is an interesting tournament guy with a decent level of upside, which is what you're looking for in tournaments a lot of the time. Or all of the time, actually. On DraftKings, Beal is much more solid there at 7,200. I like Jim Harden at 11,600 as well. I still have my concerns with Johnny Wall. Chris Paul at 8,800 I'm not into, while Otto Porter, not a bad cash play as well. Same as on FanDuel with him, 6,200. Now, Eric Gordon's a different kettle of fish over on DraftKings. He's at 6,100. And if Paul is out, I can see that, but that's still pretty highly priced, and he's probably going to be a fade to me. Because I think if Chris Paul is out, a lot of people will get on Gordon at DraftKings, but I won't at that sort of a salary. And same with Gortat. He's just priced a little bit too high at $5,200. Let's go on to the next one. We're going to talk the Atlanta Hawks and the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are favored by 11. The total is 216.5 points at point guard. Delon Wright's at 3,900. He is averaging 20 points over his last 5 games, just 16 in the last one, but that's his lowest score over his last 5 games. So at 3,900, that's not a bad floor with maybe 25 point upside. So I don't dislike using Delon Wright here. I don't love it. It is a very good matchup for him, and it could be blowouty, so he might get 2 or 3 extra minutes. So he is definitely a tournament guy who could get 28 points, which might work out to get some other high-priced guys in. Lowry's at 8,300. The matchup does suit him. It is a nice matchup. He's coming off a string of decent performances, 39 in the last game against the Thunder in just 30 minutes. I just feel that's a little bit too high, but otherwise, if he was a lower price, I would be much more interested. It is a good matchup for Kyle. While Schroeder at 7,700, I would prefer Dennis over Kyle. I save that money, and I think their level of production will be relatively similar. In fact, Schroeder is outproducing Lowry by over 4.5 points over their last 4 games, and you save $600 there. Malcolm Delaney, Isaiah Taylor, nothing for me to care about. DeMar DeRozan, 8,500. Been a little bit muted again. He does have some okay upside, some pretty good upside, in fact, but I don't feel good about using him in cash here. The blowout nature does limit him. Marco Bellinelli, minimum salary, 30 points in the last game. That is absolutely a tournament one to have a look at. He had 30 points in that last game because he can get hot, and that is the definition of a tournament type of a player. Kent Bazemore's at 59. I actually like that for cash. He's a weird player. He's getting like only 26, 27 minutes a night, but he's putting up 30 points per night nearly every night, and that's a decent level of consistency, so I like him for cash, maybe even some tournament upside there. At small forward, the artist formerly known as Torian Prince has dropped down to 5,100, so you should jump on at that price. He's coming off a 30-point game, so that obviously clears value at that price. He can be a little bit up and down, but most of the time he's relatively consistent most of the time. Yeah, he's coming off a 30-point game. I was reading the wrong number there. 30-point game. I like him here for cash. I also like the tournament upside. The Jedi, OG Anunoby, CJ Miles, don't like any of them. At power forward, Serge is at $6,000. I like what Serge has been doing up until recently, where he's averaging just 22 over the last 3, and 6,000 is a little bit too high. Siakam, no. The Baptist, John Collins, 5,700. Well, he's still averaging 27 over the last 3. Give him 27 minutes a night. He smashes through that. I just have concerns that he won't get to that playing time. But now that FanDuel's dropped him by $600, then I can definitely get him here into a tournament. I'm not really ready to go cash on him, but he is worth it. Same as Ersan at 5,300, who's averaging 32 points over the last 3. He can be inconsistent with the shooting, and that does impact his numbers. But at 5,300, he is a very, very good option here. At centre, Valanciunas at 51. I cannot trust what Dwayne Casey is going to do with him. Jakob Poeltl, not interested in him, especially with an $800 price rise. He's at 4,300 now. He's averaging 25 over the last 5. I just feel that his floor is fine, but his ceiling's not high enough, but his floor is not high enough for me to go at 4,300. So on other sites where he's a bit cheaper, yeah, I think Poeltl is worth a look, especially if they give him split minutes with Valanciunas or even more minutes, which is something that has been happening a little bit more lately. On DraftKings, Lowry at 7,700, in on that. Schroeder at 72, really in on that. Like him a lot there. And Serge Ibaka at 5,600. Much prefer using Ibaka over on DraftKings than what I do on FanDuel. So I think all 3 of those guys are cash and tournament type plays. The Baptist at 5,200, I'd almost be ready to lock that in cash at 5,200. While Bazemore at 59, not quite as exciting on DraftKings as he is on FanDuel. But that's still not a bad situation. Formerly is at 5,500, so unlike FanDuel, hasn't dropped right down there, so he's probably a fade over there, while Ilyasova at 5,000 is decently strong. Let's go on to the next one. I'm going to talk about the Brooklyn Nets and the Miami Heat. The Heat are favored by 6.5, and the total is 206 points here. Jim Johnson's out. Dion Waiters is out. Justice Winslow is out. So there's still value here. Tyler Johnson's at 5,900. He should start. And I feel like he is almost a cash lock. Get your 30 points, 40-point upside. Like him for cash. Like him for tournaments. I'm fading the shit out of the iron shoulder. He just can't get anything happening, Dragic. It is a brilliant matchup for him, though. So if you want to believe in Dragic, and I still like Dragic, I still believe in him, this is the one to do it in. He averages 38 points the last 3 times against the Heat. As good a matchup as you can get for point guards. You'd want him to be pushing towards 35, and that could be a struggle. His highest score in his last 5 is only 29 points. But this is as good a matchup as he's going to find. So in a tournament, yeah, maybe. Spencer Dinwiddie, really, really tumbling at the moment, down to 6,300. The form is tumbling, the price is tumbling. The play of Nick Stauskas, Karis LeVert is limiting what he can do, so he is a fade in my mind. At shooting guard, the Duke, Wayne Ellington's up to 4,600. That's because he dropped 33 in that last game. I'm not ready to go with him in cash just because he can be a little bit inconsistent because all his value comes from deep. But if he's hitting 6-7 threes, then he's going to return enough value there. You're more of a tournamenty type of guy though. LeVert at 5,800, he's getting around 28 to 30 most nights. At 5,800, that's not bad for cash. I'd question his upside. He's also listed with a questionable tag as well, so maybe a fade there. The blue swimmer, no. Jumpin' Joe Harris would be a guy at minimum salary. If LeVert is out, I'd be interested in Jumpin' Joe in your tournaments because his minimum salary and his minutes should go up. Well, Damari Carroll would also be a tournament player. If LeVert is out, they just have to push a few extra minutes into him at 5,300. He's been piss poor the last couple, but he could really bounce back with a 30-pointer, but I wouldn't feel comfortable in cash. The other small forward we want to look at is the Heat's potential best player, Joshi Richardson, 6,300 for Joshi, averaging 37 over the last 5. Bang, locked in. Cash, tournaments, really like Richo. Great matchup for him. Doing everything for this team. And I think he's got potential to go for 50 here. That's obviously upside situation, but he's got a good floor and a good ceiling. Cash, tournaments, in on Josh Richardson. At power forward, Rondé is at 7,400. This guy's just putting up numbers whenever he wants. 34 points in 24 minutes in the last game. You feel like he's almost going to drop 30 every single game. In fact, his lowest score in the last 5 is 27. So at that sort of price, 7,400, a 30-point floor is not bad. And he does have decent upside. So I like Rondé quite a bit here. Olynyk at 6,700 is pushing it to me. With Whiteside back, now Whiteside's going to be limited, but will he be 18-minute limited, 24-minute limited, 28-minute limited? And that's going to have a direct impact on Olynyk, but he is still worth throwing into a GPP because Jim Johnson and Justice Winslow are out, so he could play 30, 32 as a power forward and easily get 45 points. Don't feel good with cash, though, with him. Jordy Mickey, Quincy Acey. Acey had a big game in the last one. You could throw him into a tournament, but I wouldn't. At center, Jarrett Allen, minimum not minimum, 3,800. The blocks can come from him. 25-pointer is a potential, but I don't feel super strong there. While Whiteside at 7,500, not ready to get in on the Whiteside action just yet. I want to see him actually produce and play decent minutes because I'm not sure even when he's fully healthy that he's going to get 32 a night anymore. On to DraftKings. Less value over here than what you'd normally see. I like Rondé a lot at 6,300. I love that. In fact, that's a really strong play. Hollis Jefferson at 6,300. I like Bam Adebayo, who I didn't talk about on FanDuel. A little bit too highly priced in my mind there. But 4,300 for him on DraftKings. A great ease. We've seen centers go bananas against the Nets. At 4,300, he doesn't even need Whiteside to be extraordinarily limited. He's averaging 30 points across his last 3. He could very comfortably get 24 or 25 points here with that 30 to 35 point upside. So I like him. Probably lean more tournament, but he could be a cash sort of a player. The Duke's at 47, and much like on FanDuel, a GPP guy, same as Jumpin' Joe Harris, as I talked about. You can have a look at Source Castillo at minimum salary as well. He would be a big beneficiary if Karis LeVert went down. I didn't mention him before, but on both sides, if LeVert is out, really, really like Stauskas as a guy that can handle the ball, get assists, hit some threes. He's been really, really strong over the last couple of games. Joshi at 7,100 on DraftKings, probably a little bit high, but the 6,000 for Tyler Johnson is still a good play. The next game up, the Dallas Mavericks and the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans are favored by 6.5, and the total is 212.5. I think it's fair to say that Rajon Rondo won't drop 25 assists in this game. He is at 5,800. I think a lot of people will follow that. They'll chase that number, so he is a fade in my mind. Prior to that, he'd played 4 straight games of under 26 minutes per game, and even though he had 48 points in that last game, his 5-game average is only 22. So that just shows how putrid some of those other games before then had been. You could throw him into a tournament, but the likelihood of him having back-to-back 48-point games or even 35-point games, I feel, is pretty unlikely. Dennis Smith's at 47. He's always got that explosive ability, so that makes him a tournament guy, but I don't feel confident about it. Well, JJ Barea at 52. Yeah, struggled in that last game, but I actually don't mind him as a cash guy here. get you 25 points. He is worth a look, but there are 9 other games, so he's not the best guy on the board for that. At shooting guard, Wes Matthews, I just have no interest in him. Devin Harris, Drew Holiday, 7,700. Like what Drew's doing, really consistent, just too high in the salary. But, come in a little bit cheaper than that. I think that he can be a guy that gets you 33 or 35. And that's that's a little bit under where it needs to be. I just don't believe in him at that level of salary. At small forward, the pencil, 6,500, Harrison Barnes has been quiet in the last couple of games. I'm in on him in this one. Good matchup for him. He's got a good record against New Orleans. I think that this is a 35-plus pointer for the pencil. Each one more at 46, really tough to trust on an ongoing basis. At power forward, Tone Davis, 10-9, bang, in. He's really hard to fade in any situation. Well, Dirk at 55, he's getting hard to fade. He's averaging 35 over his last 3, 31 over his last 5. And of course, at 5,500, you get 30 points. It's a win. And Dirk is in that mode. He's consistent at the moment. The minutes are fine. The salary has risen. But I still think that he is worth consideration. While Maxi Kleber at 4,300, he is as inconsistent as they come in terms of playing time. But he is a GPP guy to pay attention to. Now, the only problem we have with Dirk is Boog. If he's going to match up on Boog, maybe his minutes go down. We see more Salah Mejri to try and absorb some fouls, and that can limit Dirk. So he is more of a tournament guy, but there is something there to see at least. Now, as for Boog, 11,000, let's go. Get our 55. I feel like that's almost a guarantee for Boog here as well. Really strong spot for both him and Tone Davis. Over on DraftKings, they're the two guys I like a lot for cash and tournaments. Cousins and Davis goes without saying, really. Harrison Barnes at 64 is okay for cash, while Rondo at 6,100 is definitely fade city for me. Not as interested in Barea or as interested in Smith over on DraftKings either. And Dirk is up to 5,200, which takes away a level of appeal from him also, as well as the unfavorable matchup. But I could still look at him as a GPP sort of a guy over on DraftKings. Haven't talked much Kevin Farrell. He's at 4,600. He is inconsistent. He's a tournament guy, but I don't feel super strongly about him in any real way either. Let's go to the next game now, the 5th game of the night. It's the Indiana Pacers taking on the Chicago Bulls. Victor Oladipo is out of this one. So, actually, no, we're going to do that game next. No, we're not. We're going to do... I jumped the gun. We're going to do the Milwaukee Bucks, the Jason Kidds, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder are favored by 9, and the total is 211.5 points here. At point guard, we are talking Russ Westbrook. He is at 11,500. The Bucks have been pretty good against opposition point guards so far this season, and Russell himself has struggled a little bit in past meetings with them, but he is on a roll, averaging 60 points over his last 5, so he's totally fine. But there are other guys that I would prefer. Jim Harden, if Chris Paul is out. Guys like Adetokounmpo, who's in this game as well. If I'm spending up big, Tone Davis, Boog Cousins, those guys I would prefer over Westbrook on this slate of games. Bledsoe's at 7,400, obviously very comfortably exceeded that today. It is a decently high price. I would feel okay about him in cash, but I wouldn't feel super strongly about using him. Chrissy Middleton's at 73, and he's more of a tournament guy. Robertson, Brogdon, really hard to trust either of those guys either. At small forward, Adetokounmpo, 11,300. He's struggled a little bit against the Thunder with just a 42-point average in their last 3 outings, but at $600 price drop on FanDuel with 65-point upside, I think he is a tournament guy, and I think he has a level of cash value that does make him an interesting guy. I would prefer him over Westbrook marginally, but that's mainly just because it's an extra $200 saving there for him. Also, Paulie George at 8,400. That's a price rise for him. 41-point average over the last 5, including some strong games in his last couple. Don't really feel that's a lock by any stretch, but he does have that ability. You feel like he's going to get you 35 or 36, which is not a bad cash floor for a guy that's costing you over 8,000. At power forward, Melo's at 6,100. He's been all right. 29-point average over the last 5. That's not a bad cash situation for him. Lowest score in his last 5, 26, which for 6,100, decent floor. The matchup is a bit of a struggle for Melo. If he's going to be matched up against Adetokounmpo, that could really bother him. So that would make me fade him in a lot of cash situations. But it's something to watch. The Muppet John Henson, 5,200. I wouldn't feel super comfortable about using him. At center, we've got Thon McCurr, and we don't want anything to do with that. While Steve-O Adams is up to 7,400. Love Steve. Too high. I won't be spending 7,400 on Steve Adams. Even though he is averaging 34 over his last 5, I don't feel good about using him. Although, in saying that, we've seen centers put up good numbers against the Bucks so far this season. A little bit reduced recently, but I'm still not, still not getting super excited about using Steve Adams at that elevated price tag. On DraftKings, Antetokounmpo's at 10.7, love that. Steve Adams at 6.3, love that as well. And Paulie George at 7.8, so some real value there. Westbrook at 11.5, much preferring Antetokounmpo over him, given that we're saving almost $1,000. Now, he's still been crushing at 62 average over the last 5 for us. He's a tournament guy, but I don't feel great about him as a cash play here. Middleton is still a fade. Brogdon, we don't know what's going to happen. The Muppet at 4,600, Johnny Henson, is a tournament guy more on DraftKings than what he is over on FanDuel. While Eric Bledsoe's $7,000, I can get behind that on cash on DraftKings. I think it's worthwhile. He's averaging 43 over his last 5 games over with that scoring system. Now we're going to talk about that other game, the Indiana Pacers and the Chicago Bulls. As I said, Victor Oladipo is out, so expect Lance Stevenson to get another start. The Bulls are somehow favored by 3, and the total is 208.5. At point guard, Daz Collison, 6,300. He had 32 in that last game without Oladipo. More minute stability because Corey Joseph's playing more at the 2. So it's 6,300. I don't mind it. I don't fully love it. He's not like a lock guy, but I definitely feel a higher level of confidence in Collison in this game, given the opposition and given the situation of Oladipo being out. Corey Joseph's at 4,200. He just isn't a huge stat stuffer, but he can have those weird games where he hits tons of threes or gets 3 or 4 steals. So at 4,200, he is a tournament guy, but I don't feel very cashy with him. Or Chris Dunn at 8,100 now. He's been putting up numbers. There's no denying that. Putting up some really, really strong performances, but 8,100, yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow with a 37-point average over the last 5 and a 13-point minimum. That's a tournament-type only situation for Dunn there, I think. At shooting guard, Justin Holiday's at 52. Actually don't mind him for cash, 25 average over the last 3, which is right on where it needs to be. The ridiculous poor shooting has eased with him. So I think he's not a bad cash play, but pretty limited ceiling. At small forward, Lance at 5,800, love that. Had 43 in that last game. Everyone's going to be on him again. Even though the price has risen so much, they will still be going back to Stevenson, and I completely understand why I would be back on him as well. Maybe fade him in tournaments at the elevated salary. Nwaba, Denzel the Hammer Valentine, I don't really see too much in those guys. If I'm going to take one, it's going to be the Hammer, because he does have 40-point upside, whereas I don't think Nwaba gets to that. Larry Markkinen at 54, I don't want anything to do with. Thaddeus Young, no. Punch Bob Shipbloke at 45, no. And Nikola Mirotic at 6,500, no. So in essence, the power forwards in this game, I'm not really interested in. They all just seem too highly priced. The situations are all a little bit convoluted with them. At center, Bob Lopez, 5,000. Well, he was really good in that last game for the Bulls, 28 points there. But prior to that, he'd been getting around 20. And that's not enough for 5,000. But Miles Turner has yielded some decent numbers to centers so far. So if you're struggling for a cheap center, I think that Lopez is definitely an in-play option here. And I'd prefer him to, say, John Henson, who's more expensive over on FanDuel. As for Turner, 7,900. He's averaging 31 over the last 5, so I think that salary is a little too high for him. I'd much prefer it at 7,100, then I'd be all in. He's a little bit too inconsistent for my take as well, so not really interested in him at that price. But again, if it was cheaper in the matchup against Lopez, I'd be interested. On DraftKings, he does come in cheaper over on DraftKings, 6,800 for Miles, so that is a tournament upside guy. I love Lance at 56 here. I love Daz Collison at 58 for cash and tournaments. And then I've got Corey Joseph and Bojan as your tournament upside guys. Bogdanovic is a guy that could find himself on a 30-pointer. He could also get 12, and that's what makes him a tournament sort of a player. Really hard, again, to use Mirotic or Markkinen. Chris Dunn at 7,400 is definitely more in play on DraftKings. He's got a 36-point average over the last 5. Not as egregiously priced as what he is on FanDuel, so I'm interested in using him, but I'd probably be more of a GPP type of a scenario rather than cash. Let's crack on to the next one. It's the Phoenix Suns and the Sacramento Kings. Who knows? Who knows what is going to happen in this game? especially from the Sacramento side. We have no idea what sort of starting lineup is going to be rolled out there, what sort of minutes are going to be rolled out there. In fact, this is your pretty much ideal GPP, who the hell knows what's going to go on sort of game. At point guard, Georgie Hill, 5,500. The minutes have been a little bit reduced and the production down. Mainly that's blowout-ish type stuff, but even then, he is tough to rely upon. It is a good matchup for Hilly, so I do think that if you're going to ever use him in cash, this could be the one to do it in. The Suns point guards, Ulis, Isaiah Cannon, I have no interest in any of them. Well, Frank Mason started the last game for the Kings and put up 6 points in 10 minutes. I don't want that. At shooting guard, Garrett Temple plays minutes, doesn't put up numbers, so that's not a good combination. While Budrick healed at 5,100. We're going to get 28-minute Budrick or 17-minute Budrick. 28-minute Budrick at 51, I'm in on that. 17, not so much. So he is a tournament guy, but not strong. While Bogdan Bogdanovic, 5,000, sign me up. That is one Kings guy where I feel like he's going to get 30 minutes a night until Jaeger comes and dicks me. But I think he's going to get 30 minutes a night. I think he's going to be able to put up 27 points, and I feel that with a level of consistency that I don't normally feel about Kings guys. So I like Bogdan here. I also love Devin Booker at 7,800. Now I want to comment on one thing the Suns did. The Suns want to make Devin Booker the face of their franchise. Of course, absolutely no problem with that. It's 100% what they should do. They want to give him input on the next coach and free agents, which is just a horrible decision. I know you want to keep him happy, but it's just a horrible decision. The last time they did that, they ended up with Earl Watson because PJ Tucker and Tyson Chandler said, "Oh, good bloke, should get him." "Oh, all right, we won't interview anyone else. Let's just bring him in." "Oh, no worries, done." Players making free agent decisions, Dwight Howard bringing Big Baby Davis across, it just doesn't work. Like players making personnel decisions, they're hiring their boss and their co-workers. It is ridiculous. It doesn't work. Star players in particular, they make, in general, horrible executives and horrible coaches and horrible broadcasters. They're not good at these things. So Devin Booker can play. He can be the face of your franchise. He's the man. He takes the shots. He does the media. He gets the sponsorship deals. All of that. He should not be making or having large inputs at the age of 20 or 21 is he now, maybe he's 21, at the age of 21, inputs on who his boss will be and on who his co-workers will be. I just think that is a bad decision, but we'll see how it goes. Not like Ryan McDonough's been killing it, but I wouldn't be giving that responsibility to a 21-year-old who has no experience in evaluating players' talents. Remember, the players, for as much as that you can say, oh, they play the game, they don't know anything. They get things wrong all the time. They are poor judges of talent, fit, contracts, all that sort of stuff in general. So maybe Booker's different. I don't think I'd be ready to bank on that. But regardless, he is a good DFS play over here. At small forward, or Malachi Richardson's a shooting guard. He started the last game. His minimum salary, he put up 7 points in 16 minutes. I guess you could consider him a tournament guy, but I wouldn't be getting too excited. At small forward, TJ Warren had that weird game in the last one. He put up 17 points, 17 DFS points as well, and literally no other stats. He's at 7,500. That's probably going to be a fade from me, although it's a great matchup. So maybe in a tournament with Booker back, he can get some more action going. Joshy Jackson, Justin Jackson, no. Power forward, Marquise Chris. I'm ready to go with Chris here. I'm ready to throw him into a GPP. He's progressing nicely. The minutes are coming back up. The numbers look better. He is acting a little bit better on the court as well. I definitely don't want to use him in cash, but he does have some tournament upside. While Zach Randolph at 5,800, the salary is plummeting because his minutes are coming down. Now, he could come back out here and play 36 minutes and just go bananas. That would make him a tournament sort of guy, but I cannot trust what is going to happen with the playing time of so many people in this game. Tyson Chandler, 4,500, no upside, limited floor. Costa Koufos was a DMP in the last game. Willie Cauley-Stein came off the bench and played 36 minutes and had 37 points, but he is now at $7,000. And that's because he's been averaging 33 points over his last 5, but I have no trust that Jaeger's going to do the right thing by him. More trust than other players, but very little. So he's more of a GPP guy than anything, while Alex Len at 6,000 should play 30 minutes a night, but won't, and that is going to be a fade for moi. On DraftKings, I like Cauley-Stein at 6,300 on DraftKings for cash. That's I think that's really strong over there. While Len at 5,200 has that GPP 35-point upside, and Marquise Chris at 36, I really like on DraftKings as a tournament type upside. Devin Booker I think he's too highly priced on DraftKings. 8,500. Yes, he's averaging 52 in the last 3 games, 47 over his last 5. I just feel like that is too high at 8,500. But if you're ever going to take a flyer on him, at that price, you do it against the Kings because he can drop a 50 or drop a 60 against them, and that would make the value back at 8,500. Also like Bogdan at 4,600 as a fairly strong cash option over on DraftKings. Let's go on to the next game now. We have got the Charlotte Hornets and the Golden State Warriors. Steph is out. The Warriors are favored by 11, and the total is 214. I'm not sure how much Jordan Bell we see in this game with a matchup against Dwight Howard. That's going to be a tough one. Omri Caspi is questionable. If he misses time, a few extra minutes to Iguodala, a few more to Kevon Looney, a little bit more to Uncle P, Nick Young as well. Not enough to really change much DFS-wise. At point guard, Kemba's at 7,500. That's not a bad salary for Kemba, but there are better guys out there, so not really keen on that. Shawnee Livingston, Pat McCaw with another opportunity to split the minutes for Golden State. McCaw was good in the last game. He's a shooting guard. He's minimum salary. You can throw him into a tournament mix, but that's about it. Other shooting guards, Batum at 5,600. I think that a 30-pointer is not an unrealistic expectation here for Batum, so I like him. Clay at 7,300, really, he's just struggling at the moment, so I'm not really feeling too much about Clay. While Jez Lamb's at 49, more of a tournament guy than cash. Small forward, Durant's at 11,300, bang, in. Ready for that. He has been a little bit down, no doubt about that. Average of under 50 over the last 5, but I do like this for him and should be getting back over 50 in this game. Fingers crossed. Kid Gilchrist at 5,000. Iguodala, they're not guys that really interest me. Jordy Bell's at 4,900. Now, he exceeded that off the bench in the last game. 33 points in 22 minutes. I don't feel as high a level of confidence here against Howard. I think he's more of a GPP guy here rather than a cash guy. Despite his ability to rack up numbers, I think this could be a 17-minute potentially. I think he's more likely to get 17 minutes than 25 minutes in this game. Pachulia's big body, David West, even JaVale McGee can bang a little bit more with Dwight than Bell, who's quite a bit shorter. Not that Dwight's all that tall, but strong he is. Draymond's at 8,300. That I don't mind that for cash, actually. I'd much prefer using him over Klay Thompson. Frank the Tank, David West, not really anything there. Zaza at center and Dwight. Dwight at 8,000. He's been playing well, but an $8,000 center against the Warriors is always, to me, a recipe for disaster. So that is not one I'm really keen on. Over on DraftKings, Clay's at 6,700. That's tournament. While Batum at 53. Probably could go with cash, but I do like it for tournaments. Probably more for tournaments, but you could cash that. While Durant at 10.6 is a nice price drop, so I'm in on that for cash and for tournaments. Draymond at 79 is also okay. And Dwight at 74, still not low enough for me to really consider in a matchup against the Warriors. Let's go on now to the last game of the night. It's the Clippers, it's the Lakers, it's the potential return of Blake Griffin. We've got Kyle Kuzma, who's also questionable, and Wes Johnson, who's questionable. So there's a ton of GPP upside in this game. Of course, if Kuzma's out, we're going Larry Nance, we're getting Julius Randle involved. If Blake is out, then maybe you throw a Jamil Wilson back in there, but really he hasn't been thriving huge amounts, but would give more value to Lou Williams and Austin Rivers if Griffin happens to miss. Milosh is at 5,900. Sorry, Milosh, that is too expensive. I think if Griffin's around, he can get more assist numbers because Griffin's a better player, obviously, but he is a fade there. Well, Jordy Clarkson up to $7,000 now. I still think it's worth using him, but probably lean more towards tournaments. He does have that 40-point upside, but I think the floor is a little bit lower at that sort of salary. Austin's at 6,200. If Blake is out, I'm in on Austin at 6,200. At shooting guard, Caldwell Pope's at 6,300. We cannot trust that for cash whatsoever, but this is a great matchup, and if you're ever going to use him in tournaments, I think this is the one to do it in. Joshy Hart, the hitman, 4,400 for Josh. 30 minutes in the last game, even with KCP playing and Brandon Ingram playing, that is encouraging. Still just 22 points, but I don't really think he's a good DFS play here. I don't think his ceiling's high enough with those other guys around. While Lou Williams at 7,100. Blake in, probably fade. Blake out, I'd consider it even a cash situation. Brando Ingram, 7,300. He had 39 in 44 minutes in the last game. In on him for cash, in on him for tournaments. Really strong matchup for him as well, whether it's Wes Johnson, Sammy Decker, CJ Williams, whatever. I think that Ingram's got 50-point upside in this game, hopefully. Decker and Johnson, don't care. Power forward, Blake, 9,000. No way I'm going back to that. The table, Montrezl Harrell, 39. Of course, he's got zero value unless Griffin's out. If Griffin is out, then Harrell definitely is a GPP guy. He had 37 in the last game. And then you got Larry Nance at 44, who is a guy that I would look at to tournaments if the future MVP is out. As for Kuzma, 7,400, wasn't good in the last game and was a little bit limited by all the minutes he'd been playing. I think at that price, he's more of a tournament sort of a guy, especially if he's going to be nursing this quad problem. As for Julius Randle, he is listed as a center. He's at 5,500. I would be all over that if Kuzma is out. Otherwise, he's just too hard to rely upon, but you could use him for tournaments. We just don't know what Walton's going to do on a game-by-game basis. Whereas DeAndre Jordan at 7,700, I feel really good about his floor, and I think he's got a decent upside, but he's more of a cash than tournament sort of a guy. Over on DraftKings, Clarko's at 6,400. Way more into that than on FanDuel. Love that for him for cash and tournaments. Ingram at 66 is a really strong play. I think one of the better plays on DraftKings of the whole day, while Caldwell Pope as a tournament guy. And all the same stuff applies to guys like Lou Williams and Austin Rivers, although they're both less enticing than what they are over on FanDuel, while Nance and Randall, if Kuzma is out, do become more appealing. Let's go on to the other sites and just run through that stuff quickly. Over on Yahoo for tournaments, we've got Daz Collison, Kelly Olynyk, Milosh, Georgie Hill, the Muppet John Henson, the Duke Wayne Ellington, Marquise Chris, Marvin Williams, Josh the Hitman Hart, Jakob Poeltl, and Maxi Kleber. And for cash options, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Dirk, Corey Joseph, Bam Adebayo, Will Cauley-Stein, Lance Stevenson, Jordy Clarkson, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, Beal, Paul George, and Boog Cousins. On Moneyball for tournaments, Jim Harden, Paul George, Bradley Beal, Chrissy Dunn, Brando Ingram, Georgie Hill, Larry Nance Jr., Maxi Kleber, Jakob Poeltl, and that's it for the tournament picks. For cash, Dirk, Corey Joseph, Joshy Richardson, The Pencil, Daz Collison, Cauley-Stein, Lance Stevenson, Steve-O Adams, Jordy Clarkson, Devin Booker, Tone Davis, Kev Durant, and Boog Cousins. And on Draft Stars for tournaments, Tone Davis, Miles, Turner, Ingram, Daz Collison, Olynyk, Cauley-Stein, Caldwell Pope, Teodosic, Lowry, Marketing, that is, Marquise Chris, Jarrett Allen. And for cash, it's the Muppet, it's Bogdan Bogdanovic, it's Bam, it's Corey Joseph, Georgie Hill, Serge Ibaka, Tyler Johnson, The Pencil, Harrison Barnes, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, Steve-O Adams, Lance Stevenson, Jordy Clarkson, Chrissy Dunn, Kevin Durant, and Boog Cousins. We're done. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. I am Josh Lloyd, if you've forgotten, the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And if you are listening to this over on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. It's the best way that you can help support any podcast that you do enjoy. Go and you can find us also on Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and on Spotify, and of course on YouTube. Subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment. I hope you guys have a successful weekend in your season long, in your DFS, and an enjoyable one. And, by the way, a Happy New Year to everyone. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Malcolm Brogdon.